Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Jennings with the American Coalition for Ethanol. Thanks for joining us for the webinar. I'm going to wait, a minute or so to make sure that everyone who registered can get in for the webinar before we begin. So we'll start here in about a minute or so. All right, my clock says 1 o'clock Central Time, so I think we'll begin, even though I'm sure a few people will join us as we go. Once again, thank you to everyone who's joining us for the first of 4 webinars that the American Coalition for Ethanol is planning this year. This first webinar is titled Opportunities and Challenges to Increasing Ethanol Demand. Those speaking on the webinar will be myself, Brian Jennings, and then joining me will be Jonathan Lehman. He is our legislative counsel based in Washington, D.C. Truth be told, Ron Lamberty was also going to be joining us to really kick off the webinar, but due to an unexpected change in terms of his flight schedule, he's unable to do so. So you have the dubious honor of listening to me cover Ron's area of expertise, which is the market development program. So we'll begin with that. And after I conclude walking through some of the work we're doing with retailers this year, Jonathan and I will talk about some of the challenges and opportunities facing us in Washington as we try to expand market access for ethanol. A housekeeping note for you, I think this worked well last year in terms of questions you may have. If you have a question, there's a gray question box on the, the toolbar or whatever that's called on the side of your screen. You can type those questions in, and I will either try to see them, or Shannon Gustafson on our staff is helping behind the scenes, and between 1 or 2 of us, we'll try to make sure that we get those questions covered if we can. For anyone who's joining us that's a member of the media, the information that we share today cannot be published unless ACE has an opportunity to review or edit the work before it's published. So if you have any questions or concerns about that, please contact myself or our communications director, Katie Fletcher. And finally, I've got a head cold that's hanging on a little bit, so if I clear my throat or cough, I apologize for that. I know it's not fun to be on the receiving end of that in terms of audio. I'll try to keep that at a bay, but just warning you in case you hear that. So let's get started. And really our top line goal, everything that we are trying to do at ACE, and I know this is the case for our allies in the ethanol industry as well, is we're doing anything and everything we can to try and increase demand, to expand market access for ethanol. And when it comes to some of the things that we're trying to accomplish, in certain areas we're facing some headwinds, but in other areas we've got some tailwinds to help us as well. And I think one area where the wind is absolutely at our backs is when it comes to the market development work that we do. And by that I mean the work that Ron Lamberty on our staff and others do with station owners, with C-store operators, to increase the availability of E15 and flex fuels all around the country. And thanks to the membership support that we receive from ACE members, but also some additional funding from corn states and the National Corn Growers Association, I'm really pleased to report that we're going to be able to somewhat dramatically expand our Flex Fuel Forward campaign for 2018. And so I'm going to highlight some of the things that we're going to be able to accomplish through the expansion of this campaign this year. And the first is maybe I'll back up a minute and say, first of all, if you're not familiar with the Flex Fuel Forward campaign, this includes paid advertising, earned in social media, retailer to retailer outreach, an educational video series on our website, and then sort of a one-stop shop for retailers at our website, which is flexfuelforward.com. And the campaign foundation is really based on the real life experiences of retailers who have been there, done that. And what I mean by that is retailers who have already made the switch to selling E15 and or higher blends of ethanol, and they've been able to make money by doing so. They've been able to bring in more customers by doing so. They are really the messenger delivering the message that we're trying to convey through the Flex Fuel Forward campaign. So over the course of 2018, one of the more significant things we plan to do and have already begun doing is to launch a series of short videos, 2 to 3 minute videos on our flexfuelforward.com website, highlighting these retailers that have been there, done that with E15 and flex fuels. These videos demonstrate the success they've had adding these products. These videos address some of the common questions, some of the frequently asked questions and concerns that retailers have about adding these fuels as well. The videos include retailers from different parts of the country, from different kinds of companies, large and small, single store owners and chains, because we know that the retail sector is indeed diverse and has a variety of different business models and obviously different places around the country. So far, we've released 4 videos, and you can watch them all on our website, flexfuelforward.com. We were going to try to show a couple of them, but had some trouble in the practice run, and so we decided simply to encourage you to go to the website where you can see all of them for yourself. And these videos will be promoted through some paid advertising that we plan to do in C-store websites and publications, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. If you haven't yet been to the flexfuelforward.com website, the first thing you'll probably notice if you're an ethanol producer or you're a corn grower on the webinar today is that this isn't a website designed for you. The intended audience for the flexfuelforward.com website and the entire campaign is the retail community, C-store owners, marketers big and small who are looking to get an edge on their competition and looking into adding E15 or higher blends as a product. And since everyone in the world seems to gravitate toward doing more and more of their business on their smartphone, one of the other significant changes we'll be making this year to our website is simply to make it more smartphone friendly, so folks can navigate all of the information right from their fingertips. One of the long-standing, I would describe, features of our market development program over the years has been that Ron and others on our staff have attended and been a speaker at some of the big petroleum conferences and trade shows around the country. And with the expansion of our campaign this year, one of the great things we're going to be able to do is to bring some of the retailers that we're featuring in our videos, some of these successful E15 retailers, with us to these trade shows and these events for 2018. And one example of that is Bob O'Connor, who you see in many of the photos here. He's the owner of Jet's convenience stores based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And he joined our staff at the National Association of Convenience Store show last fall in Chicago. And you may be able to see from the photographs, Bob brought a life-size display of one of his blender pumps. And what Ron and others on staff indicated to us was that several times over the course of that trade show, Bob was able to tell a prospective retailer, hey, this is one of my pumps. Let me show you how we're doing it at my stores. And that was a very effective way to convey the messages that we were trying to convey. And just to see the interaction between Bob and other retailers, that peer-to-peer interaction really confirmed for us that this was a good strategy. It produced a couple really good leads out of that NACS show, a large retailer in the southeastern part of the country and another retailer in the northeast area. And so we're going to be bringing Bob and other retailers with us to these trade shows this year. That event schedule has already begun. In fact, today, Chuck Beck of our staff and Mike Lewis of Pearson Fuels, based in California, are at the Western Petroleum Marketers Conference in Las Vegas, which covers the entire West Coast, and obviously California being the most important market for ethanol here at home. Next week, Ron and Liz of our staff are going to be at the Petroleum and C-Store Expo of Mid-America in Kansas City, and I know many of our ethanol producers in that area will be joining us. And we'll be at other areas around the country as well in the coming days and weeks. In fact, these shows cover all 50 states. If you have an interest in joining us, just contact Ron or Chuck or Liz of the staff, and they'd welcome your participation in that. We're also able to improve some of the marketing materials that we're using when it comes to both paid advertising and what we're showing retailers at these events. We'll be doing some pre and post show marketing. We'll be doing something called geofencing, which Ron could describe better than me, but what I've heard him describe that as, if you're a retailer attending a petroleum marketer trade show and we have your information, we're able to send you a text message if you're close to our booth to encourage you to come over and see us and talk about E15 and flex fuels. And we're also going to be displaying new marketing material based on sort of a simple two-part message this year, strike gold without digging. And what we're trying to convey here is to help retailers understand, number one, hey, you can make money by adding E15 and flex fuels, thus the strike gold part. And then two, contrary to what many retailers have been told by our opponents, you don't have to break concrete in order to add these fuels, especially with E15. The equipment, the lines, the tanks, everything is going to be compatible. So that's really the message that we're going to try to convey in terms of some of the marketing. And that same strike gold without digging message will be part of our paid advertising campaign this year as well. We've got a 6-figure ad budget for 2018. It includes a healthy dose of Google ads and search engine optimization as well. Primarily, these are going to be digital ads, but there are some print versions as well. On the left side of your screen, you see a print version of our advertising. On the right side of our screen, you see one of the digital ads. And these ads will be in the most popular publications and websites in the retail and C-store industry. Publications like NACS, Convenience Store Decisions, Convenience Store News. We're going to be doing some social media advertising as well. You click on one of these ads, these digital ads, and it'll take you either to our website or to the videos that we launched, that we will be launching over the course of the year. So that's some of the work we're doing in the market development area with retailers and wholesalers and marketers. And Ron certainly would have done a much more thorough and better job, but that's my attempt to cover that. We're now going to switch gears and cover some other ways that we're trying to support increased access for ethanol both here and around the world, with a heavy emphasis on government affairs and public policy as we round things out. Another bright spot, another area where certainly there have been more tailwinds than headwinds for our industry is on the export side of things. We obviously exported a record volume of product, approaching 1.4 billion gallons in 2017, worth about $2.5 billion. And U.S. ethanol is in high demand for a variety of reasons. One, you are the low-cost producer. You continue to prove that each and every day. That's particularly evident in terms of Brazil, which I'll talk about in a moment. Number two, not only are we the low-cost producer, but it's a clean source of high octane as well. And there's a lot of demand for octane around the world. And number three, and not to be overlooked, especially in the rest of the world, most other countries are trying to adopt some sort of greenhouse gas reduction measures when it comes to emissions from automobiles. And what they are finding when they look at the life cycle carbon footprint of ethanol from the United States is that we are a very attractive option for them. And so those are some of the ways that we're able to leverage or capitalize on U.S. ethanol and exporting volume around the world. Last year, the top destinations for our product were Brazil, Canada, and India, but it should be noted we exported to about 60 different countries. And most projections call for another very robust year in 2018. In fact, most folks expect that we will probably break last year's record somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe approaching 1.6, 1.7 billion gallons or more. ACE has tried to get more involved, more supportive of our export promotion activities. We have supported the work of the U.S. Grains Council. The U.S. Grains Council has asked us to participate in some of their trade missions, particularly in Mexico. Ron Lamberty has been able to meet with retailers there about some of the advantages of switching over to E10. And we're hoping that he'll get some more opportunities to do that over the course of 2018. I was invited to go on a USDA trade mission with the Grains Council and other industry supporters to Brazil to meet with their government about their tariff rate quota. And we're going to be looking for other ways to support and promote exports over the course of the year. This year, Canada has been one of the most reliable markets for our product, and that should remain the case this year. And exports should remain strong for countries like India and the Philippines as well. We hope to have more clarity with respect to Mexico. Certainly an E10 nationwide opportunity there, with the exception of those three large metro areas, is still a big deal. Frankly, it's a huge export market opportunity in the future, only to be outdone by what may emerge in China. China is a potential game changer, obviously, if they go to an E10 nationwide standard by the year 2020. That's a gigantic demand for ethanol as a result, most of it which would need to be imported, frankly. But we can't bank on China at this stage, given the unpredictability of that country. To my knowledge, the 30% tariff remains in place there, but we also know that some shipments are heading toward China, and so we'll be keeping our eye on that over the course of the year. And while Brazil did impose that tariff rate quota, and it's still in place, and certainly it kept some U.S. ethanol at bay, the fact that Brazil was the number one leading customer of U.S. ethanol in 2017 proves how price competitive you are, even in the face of a 20% TRQ. So we remain committed to working with the U.S. government to try and address the TRQ. Frankly, we have a lot of tools at our disposal. The U.S. government does, I should say, to address this. They could take Brazil off the list of countries that enjoy certain preferences as a developing nation. They could try to get the attention of Brazil in terms of beef trade, and I think some of that work is underway. And we remain committed to working with U.S. authorities to make sure that we deal with Brazil and the TRQ. And we're also hopeful that Japan could emerge to provide some incremental demand over the course of 2018. It appears as if they're taking another look at the greenhouse gas footprint of U.S. corn ethanol, which is it could be a very positive development. And so we're waiting for some news there, but hopefully that will unfold and present some opportunities for us this year. The overarching public policy priorities that we have for 2018, based on input from ACE members, based on input from our board of directors, is on the screen before you. In no particular order: RVP relief, octane demand, defending the RFS, and market access through clean fuel policies. All of these things are designed to expand market access for ethanol. Everything we need to be working on needs to be focused on that. The first topic, probably the most urgent priority we have, in my opinion, is to finally address the reed vapor pressure limitation. And if you've heard me talk about this, you've heard me say that ACE's approach is a double barrel approach. We have been pursuing both a legislative fix to this problem and a legal administrative fix to this at EPA. We were able to make some progress last year on the legislative front thanks to bipartisan support, but particularly an effort by Senator Fisher and her colleagues on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. Unfortunately, the votes were just never there on the EPW committee. That's not a particularly friendly committee, just to be brutally honest with you, for ethanol and for ethanol policies. And so it's hard to get the votes we need there. But the good news is that Administrator Pruitt has made it a priority to have EPA attorneys look into the statute, see what they can do in terms of interpreting the Clean Air Act differently and providing a remedy to the RVP limit from the EPA end of things. And that legal analysis is ongoing. At this stage, I'm going to clear my throat and I'm going to give Jonathan an opportunity to weigh in on some of the things going on with EPA and the RVP issue.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So, one of the things that we were able to get out of the EPW committee after the RVP legislative effort failed to garner the votes was Senator Ernst, Senator Fisher kind of leveraged the need to approve Assistant Administrator Wareham, who is in charge of the Clean Air Act at EPA's nomination. Without their votes, he wouldn't have been able to kind of clear the EPW committee and wouldn't have been able to get to the floor of the Senate to be confirmed. So what they were able to leverage was a commitment from Administrator Pruitt to look at RVP and what they can do administratively. Where we've been in the past and historically under the Obama administration with, kind of the career people kind of leading the discussion was, oh, we don't have authority to do it. We need to do it legislatively and kind of close the books. We've had kind of continued dialogue with EPA kind of since Pruitt acknowledged the openness to look at the legal analysis. We've been part of a collaborative effort of a legal team looking at, kind of 3 to 4, kind of varying degrees of esoteric, interpretations of the Clean Air Act to get us to an RVP fix administratively. I think the conversation with EPA has been constructive and is better than we've had in, kind of previous administrations. And, that analysis is ongoing, but we continue to work with our partners and engage and stand ready to answer questions, kind of further push EPA as they look at this analysis at the administrator level and at the general counsel level.
Thanks, Jonathan. Another area that we are focused on, even though the opportunity may be a little further down the road than some of us would like, is the ability to expand access for ethanol to the marketplace through the octane value of our fuel. The best way to do that probably is through some sort of greenhouse gas metric, whereby automakers are required to improve fuel economy, and at the very same time reduce CO2 emissions from vehicles. There is a program in place that is designed to do that at this time, and that's obviously the CAFE greenhouse gas standards. The CAFE, the fuel economy standards, are handled by the Department of Transportation. The CO2 side of it, the greenhouse gas standards, are handled by EPA. The good news regarding this is that Administrator Pruitt, in addition to affirming that he's willing to look into whether they can address Reid vapor pressure, has been very clear with us, and his staff has been very clear with us, that EPA wants to put fuel on the table in terms of a tool the automakers can use to comply with these standards. Prior to Administrator Pruitt, EPA had taken fuel entirely off the table, which was frustrating. But now fuel is back on the table, and today's fuel isn't going to make the cut. It would require a higher octane fuel than what we have in the marketplace today in order to help these automakers, especially with the smaller turbocharged engines, comply with the standards, somewhere in the neighborhood of 98, 99 research octane number. And that's, a blend in the 25 to 30 or so percent neighborhood. So EPA is looking at high octane. We have reams of test data to prove that ethanol is a superior source of that high octane fuel. And we have a program in place, the CAFE greenhouse gas standards, that could be a vehicle by which we achieve an octane market. It's important for me to point out that octane demand at 99 or 100 RON is not going to happen in a so-called free and fair market. 98, 99, 100 RON fuel will only happen in a regulatory environment. And that's why we need to continue to push the regulatory levers here. We have a big date coming up on April 1st, and that is the date by which EPA needs to decide whether the 2022 through 2025 model year greenhouse gas standards are appropriate or not. If EPA, determines that the standards set under the Obama administration for those years are too stringent, they may issue a new rulemaking to relax or delay implementation of those standards. That will postpone, in my opinion, our opportunity to see a higher octane fuel, but it doesn't erase that opportunity. And the other important factor to take into consideration is California. The top priority of the automakers is to have one national standard that they have to comply with. California, under the Clean Air Act, is able to have a waiver whereby they can set more stringent standards than the federal government. In the deal brokered with President Obama and the automakers back in 2012, California and the United States government, EPA, agreed to one national standard. If EPA on December 1st decides to relax or slow down implementation of the 2022 to 2025 model year greenhouse gas standards, the big question mark will be, what does California do and how does EPA handle it? We believe California would like to move forward with more stringent standards, but the automakers want this one sort of blanket program. And so you can believe some negotiation is taking place as we speak between automakers, EPA, and California on all of this. And octane is very much part of the discussion because it's one of the low-cost tools with which to comply with the program. So much more clarity will be available to us in the coming months. We'll be continuing to really bird dog this issue. And I think the closing thought I would have for you when it comes to this is that it's really a matter of when we get the opportunity to have a higher octane fuel, not if we get that opportunity. And again, we should know more clarity here in the springtime. I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan to cover a few more topics, and then I'll join at the end of the webinar.
So one of the big issues that is kind of engulfing kind of the conversation out here in DC with regard to the RFS is RIN prices. And you talked to Senator Cruz, who is trying to leverage, kind of the nominee at USDA Northie to try to get changes within EPA to address RIN prices. You look at what Senator Cornyn may be doing from a legislative effort, and kind of the motivation is working to, try to reduce RIN prices. The Philadelphia Energy Solutions bankruptcy is kind of being used by proponents of, RIN price quote unquote reform as like the poster child for why the RFS is bad and it pushed a company into bankruptcy. What we've seen, if you kind of pull back the layers, is kind of even oil economists are saying that it's mismanagement at the facility and not the RFS and kind of RIN prices which drove them into bankruptcy, but it hasn't kind of caused our opposition to back or push away from kind of using it as an example. One of the, kind of things that we look at as, kind of a win-win is if we can get RVP reform done, we can increase the number of wet gallons that are used over the course of the full calendar year, and it'll take pressure off of compliance with, kind of purchasing RINs, and will lower the price kind of naturally from a market-based, kind of perspective. And, is the way by which you can try to, find a solution for Cruz and Cornyn if what they're purportedly trying to do is take some pressure off the RIN price. We've been in dialogue with, kind of our members in Congress that are champions, as well as, kind of the administration, and kind of continuing to highlight the role of RVP in that conversation. The other thing we've talked about a bit is working with the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, as well as USDA to see if there's things that they can do within an oversight realm within the RIN marketplace to work to try to make that a bit more transparent, kind of versus where it has been. And I think a lot of the, kind of activity or kind of lack of transparency has been one oil company versus another oil company, kind of small refiners versus big refiners, trying to get an edge on each other. And I think what that, kind of leads to is, kind of the main point, which is most refiners continue to oppose putting a cap on RIN prices. They see it as a market, they see it as a way by which to, kind of hedge, and they see it as a way, by which to, kind of make some dollars if they manage it correctly. So there's not unanimity within kind of the oil industry with regard to addressing these concerns. On the next slide, it just kind of highlights the fact, from a strategy perspective of, why it's important to be united and what happens when you're not united and you're divided. And, you see the oil industry in AFPM and API have been, kind of at odds on kind of various issues within the biofuel RFS space. We have been, as an industry and as, kind of ag and biofuel groups, united in our, kind of support of maintaining the RFS as a safety net, not doing things to undermine it. That position has worked well for us in that, EPA has denied, kind of moving the point of obligation. We were all opposed to it. API was opposed, and EPA looked at it and said it's not something we want to, kind of move into. You look at, kind of what's going on with requests for exemptions for small refiners and kind of the RFS waiver requests from, kind of various states. Again, oil is kind of split on, kind of those issues and kind of battling back and forth in letters to the administration and kind of covered in the press over the last few days. We continue to be united in, kind of opposition to those arguments, and we continue to have extremely strong legal grounds based on the precedent of the Texas waiver request that was denied, kind of going back 7-8 years now, with regard to the RFS having to be kind of the sole cause of any economic harm. And, there's no way then nor now that you can prove a waiver request based on kind of that set of facts. And we have that precedent EPA to rely on. And then I think the last, kind of piece is Senator Cornyn has been very quietly, or not so quietly, but without providing any detail, working on quote unquote reform legislation for the RFS, and has been keeping language pretty tight, to the vest. We hear kind of rumors, that it's going to drop this week, or it's going to drop last week, or it's not coming for a while, or it's kind of shopping it around. And what we know is our supporters and champions in the Senate do not want to provide any breath or life to it, so they are not engaging with Cornyn and not negotiating with him. That is both the Republican champions we have and the Democratic champions we have. The industry is in unanimous agreement that we don't want to see any, kind of reform legislation. We view, kind of efforts to kind of touch the RFS as undermining the safety net and kind of decreasing, kind of the mechanisms we have in place to guarantee what we have, from a blend percentage now. And doesn't give us that foundation to grow, whether it be RVP, octane, or the things that Brian has talked about. If you move to the next slide, one of the things that, kind of continues to come up, and, it's kind of one of these myths that you can never really kind of stomp down, is people wanting to justify doing something, kind of with Cornyn, or kind of doing something administratively because the RFS sunsets. After 2022, EPA can do whatever it wants. And, the fact is that, the RFS doesn't sunset. It requires EPA to set levels for 2023 and beyond. It establishes a pretty tight framework by which EPA has to look at setting those numbers, including evaluating job creation, economic development, commodity prices, air quality, and energy security. So if you look at all of those components and you're working to justify kind of setting a level, any reduction beyond what we have seen in 2022 is going to impact job creation, stifle economic development, cause commodity prices to decrease, lessen air quality, and decrease our energy security. So, a number of those factors are in place that, kind of bind EPA from a rationalization perspective to at least maintain, kind of what they have in 2022 levels. The other, kind of piece is the statute requires that advance be set no less than the percentage of fuel that was used in 2022. So both for conventional kind of corn ethanol and for advanced, it requires EPA to set levels that are not in a retraction phase, kind of likely status quo to some level of increase. And we view that as important because it's a safety net that, kind of guarantees that we won't go below a certain level as we look at ways by which to grow the marketplace. And, as you look at the next slide, you kind of see why kind of that's generally important to have that base as we look at, kind of continuing to try to grow the biofuels market. As you all know, the RFS was enacted in 2005 in large part in response to, the severe economic distress being felt, kind of in rural America from, 2000, kind of through the 2004, kind of window. And, kind of it was required the Farm Bill in '02 to spend an additional $73 billion in money to create a new counter-cyclical program to kind of help producers weather the glut of commodities and the low commodity prices. And you see, once the RFS was enacted, kind of through 2013, we saw net farm income on a generally, kind of growth perspective, moving from 70 billion in 2007 up to 124 billion in 2013. And that's when, the Obama administration started taking the RFS off track and thinking that they could reduce levels based off of the blend wall, and, kind of which we proved over the course of time to be inaccurate and illegal as determined by the courts. But, kind of as the RFS has been taken off track, farm income has kind of continued to fall. And we're now at levels that, are as low, if not a bit lower than they were when the RFS was enacted in the first place. And what that argues for is, kind of continuing, to look for ways to, kind of grow demand in order to chew up corn and kind of raise, kind of commodity prices. And, that's domestically produced biofuels. That's the exports that Brian was talking about. It's, RVP, octane, and the other components. And we look at this and, there's a couple of nuggets. The first being, kind of all things in agriculture seem to be cyclical. And as prices fall, we're now in a position of having to rewrite a farm bill in 2018. And unlike in 2002, we're not going to have any additional money by which to write the bill. So we're going to likely write it at status quo, kind of dollar amount. So that's trying to make our, kind of programs work more effectively with, kind of the same dollars with commodity, kind of safety net, crop insurance, and the like. And, kind of second, I think you look at, we'll talk about it in a bit, is, we're kind of coming into, the election year. We have a number of rural members that are up. We have the House that's in play to switch, the potential for the Senate to inch closer or, kind of at least be in the ball game for Democrats to take control, and, kind of these rural states and what the farm economy does and what each party and the administration does will be relevant. If you look to the next slide, kind of one of the other, kind of pieces that we're continuing to engage on is looking at kind of our low carbon policies, trying to constructively re-engage with, kind of open-minded folks in the environmental community, looking at the kind of the new science about how well corn sequesters carbon, and kind of what that does with regard to the, kind of the life cycle greenhouse gas, kind of analysis for corn ethanol, kind of from a state-based perspective at, kind of California, Oregon, kind of potentially Midwest if they look at, kind of low carbon fuel policies. Also working to, kind of push EPA and others at a federal level to kind of reevaluate what we see from a life cycle analysis. And as we, kind of look at, kind of pushing beyond and increasing demand, we think, kind of a fairer analysis will show that, kind of corn ethanol has a much more significant carbon benefit than has been given credit to at the existing time. So we've continued to work on kind of a white paper that lays out, kind of the science and analysis. We're in the middle of a stakeholder engagement process with, kind of environmental and kind of other stakeholders, and having generally kind of positive opening conversations in that realm. I don't know, Brian, if you want to add anything to that piece.
Just briefly, what I would add is this effort has really been spearheaded by ACE's former president and current board member, Ron Alverson of Dakota Ethanol. He lives and breathes the life cycle models, and he's convinced that the science needs to be updated. And with a little help from us and others, Ron has been able to make, I think, some very meaningful progress over the last year. This white paper that Jonathan discussed is not something that we're publicly disclosing at this point in time, because we are trying to engage groups primarily at a state-based level to try to build some greater consensus. But even if you're not, your politics don't allow you to sort of accept the low carbon climate change type policies, we can't ignore the fact that there are dollars on the table here for companies, ethanol companies in particular, who can prove that they are producing a lower carbon fuel than what otherwise might be available. The world is frankly looking at adopting these kinds of policies, and we would be foolish not to try and position our members in a place where they can benefit from this financially. And so this is as much about economics and long-term prosperity and market access for our industry as it is anything else. And so working with the modelers, working with the regulators in California and other places, we're trying to build some consensus, and we hope to have some exciting news to share with you over the course of the year.
So the last two slides that we'll just talk about is, kind of the politics and kind of the election as it shapes in 2018. And, I think as we kind of look at the Senate as our kind of backstop on, kind of preventing bad things from happening in a biofuels world, you have both McConnell and Schumer, who are acutely aware of the dynamics and, kind of the election cycle, and both wanting to make sure that they're doing what they can to win the hearts and minds of rural states. If you look to the kind of the next slide, is just kind of a look at who's up for re-election in 2018 that are in our kind of wheelhouse and breadbasket of kind of members. And you have a number of Democrats in Brown and Donnelly and Heitkamp, Klobuchar, McCaskill, Stabenow, and Tina Smith in Minnesota. You have Fisher in Nebraska. We're looking at this twofold. One, Schumer wants to make sure that he's protecting these members, and the messaging can't be, kind of Democrats are out to harm the rural economy. Two, McConnell is looking to try to pick off a few of these members, and kind of understanding that, kind of things like kind of farm bill, biofuels are important, kind of talking points and messaging, kind of in that realm of the conversation. I think that is what, at the end of the day, keeps, kind of any oxygen from kind of growing amongst the corn and effort on the RFS, in that McConnell is going to have zero appetite to be kind of splitting his conference of members and giving Democrats, kind of in these states, kind of talking points that Republicans aren't as, kind of strong or united in support of biofuels and the farm economy. I think the other, kind of component here, that is, kind of worth looking at is kind of where the administration is on key issues. If you look at kind of, I think where Trump's been, kind of generally personally on the RFS, he's been, I promised Grassley I'd be pro-ethanol, so I'm pro-ethanol, and we continue to have to, kind of use him to sit on Pruitt on occasion, or kind of others within, kind of his staff, on occasion on these issues. So he continues to be there. I think in his mind, kind of tax reform was critically important and kind of a big talking point for rural America on kind of both the estate tax and allowing, kind of pass-through entities to, kind of take a lower percentage. If you kind of monitored his comments down at kind of the Farm Bureau kind of convention, those are the two things he highlighted. I think we need to be kind of mindful that there's more. If you look at kind of what he's proposed, in the budget with regard to cuts in, kind of farm bill programs and other components, they're not necessarily solid. If you look at what they're doing with NAFTA and kind of some of our trade agreements. They're not necessarily aligned with kind of where we are from an agricultural perspective. So I think that'll color some of the conversations in these races as well. But I think generally, if we're looking at it from our legislative and political, kind of tactic, we couldn't ask for a better slate of members being up this go around, because our issues will be kind of front and center, and people wanting to tell the positive story that they're working to protect them and improve the rural economy. So I'll pause there, Brian, if you want to take it back.
All right, thanks, Jonathan. And finally, I want to remind everybody that in about a month from now, in fact, the 10th annual ACE FlyIn will be taking place in DC. The dates are the 21st and the 22nd of March. We'll be at the headquarters at the Liaison Capitol Hill Hotel, where we've been many times before. We're very pleased to report to you that Bill Wirham, who is the Assistant EPA Administrator for Air and Radiation, will be joining us the morning of the 21st. Mr. Wirham is in charge of all things ethanol. He is in charge of RFS implementation. He is in charge of Pruitt's legal analysis of whether EPA can address the Reid vapor pressure issue for us from an administrative standpoint. Mr. Wirham, his shop oversees the greenhouse gas standards imposed upon automakers, and so those of you interested in octane, ethanol issues begin and end in Bill Wirham's office at EPA. And so we're delighted that he'll be joining us. We hope many of you will be able to as well. We will, of course, once again be making some visits to Capitol Hill, and as usual, Shannon will arrange those visits on your behalf. The first day, in addition to listening to and just talking with Mr. Wirham, we will walk through some of our priority issues and things to emphasize while on Capitol Hill. And then the second day, we're going to be holding what we're now calling a government affairs summit, where it's partially the teams reporting back to everybody how the visits went, if there were any common themes that we can draw from our Capitol Hill visits, any intelligence we can collect from the visits we make on Capitol Hill. But we'll also talk about our priorities and whether we're on the right track as an organization in pursuing what we are pursuing, or if we need to make some adjustments. So we encourage you to join us for both days and really get the full deal. If you have any questions about the details, please contact Shannon Gustafson on our staff, and that's who you would talk to, of course, to register for this event as well. So wanted to remind you of that, and that's what we have to share with you today. I want to thank you. It went a little longer than I thought it would, so I apologize for that, but I want to thank you for joining us and staying with us. I don't know if we have a few questions. I know Shannon has notified me. We've had a couple questions come in regarding the market development activities, and one of them, I'm just going to be honest, I don't know that I can answer, and I think I would rely upon Ron, who is on an airplane right now, so we'll have to get back to the questioner. Another one has to do with whether we can get stations that are building brand new from the ground up, whether we can get them to add ethanol. Or why can't we get them to add ethanol? The example given in this question is in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Some companies such as Kroger, Strips, and Murphy USA just built new gas stations, but they did not include ethanol. And I assume by that you mean E15 and higher blends, even though they're selling it at other locations in Texas. How can we get them to do this? And the questioner is right. One of the best opportunities, especially to add blender pumps, so you have maximum flexibility as a retailer, is when a new construction occurs. And frankly, the upcharge, if that's what you want to call it, for a blender pump from a so-called regular pump isn't all that much, and the cost has largely been covered by programs such as the Biofuels Infrastructure Partnership through USDA, or the industry sponsored Prime the Pump program. Unfortunately, Louisiana, of course, is one of those states where, you know, E10 was probably one of the last, that was probably one of the last states to go for E10, and certainly we will have some struggles with E15 and higher blends, but I think the questioner is on the right track, that we need to make sure that we're in contact with those kinds of companies that we know are building new sites, and get the advantages of E15 and higher blends in front of them before they build, so they can take that into consideration. So that's something I'll be visiting with Ron about. So that's my lame attempt to answer that question. Shannon tells me that we don't have any other questions at this time. And because we've gone on for almost an hour, I'm going to just make an executive decision and say, if you do have questions, email me or Ron or Jonathan, and we'll try to get to you. Otherwise, thank you for sharing about an hour of your day with us to go over these issues. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to talking with you again in the future. So thank you very much.